So I have a couple things that I want to talk about today, and I'll just keep talking until we have some more people log on. Um, I have a feeling that lockdown round two is upon us. People are already hoarding toilet paper and necessities. Uh, it's going to get extremely interesting, you guys. For those of us that have been waiting for legal counsel to help us in getting our tenants out of the property, and we're patiently waiting for a lockout date. If we get locked down again, there will be no lockout dates. So we'll go right back into a holding pattern, unfortunately. As nicely as I could say this. Hang on, I'm still letting people in, you guys. Letting people in, letting people in. Good morning, everybody. Just letting people get logged on. So bear with us. If you got something you want to talk about, let's talk about it. Mostly I'm going to talk about COVID pandemic shutdown round two, because it's coming. My guess is we'll be completely locked down by the end of the month. Happy Thanksgiving. Apparently COVID's bringing us all a little something for Christmas. We're going to get locked down again. It's going to happen. For those of us that are waiting for lockout dates that are currently in litigation, buckle up, because as soon as they lock us down, the courts close, the sheriff's department seizes, and nothing happens. Everything becomes to a roaring halt, and it goes nowhere as far as legal process. In the last shutdown that we had, I had a client that was 3 days away from lockout when the order to shelter in place came, and her lockout was canceled. It's went on for 7 months before she got a new lockout date. 7 months. It took the courts to reopen again. And by that time, her writ of possession has expired. They're only good for 6 months. So you have to ask the court to issue a new one. Yada, 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 yada. It just starts this chain reaction of things that aren't wonderful. So if I had to tell you guys something, buckle up. This is going to be a hell of a ride. Brace for impact. If you can get some kind of a variance from your mortgage company regarding payment, please know that you do have that as an option as long as they allow it. Any deferment that you're given by the bank, you must then apply to the tenant. As far as non-payment of rent goes. But remember, the rent is not technically due until the very last day of the month of January of next year anyway. So with that being said, if you need possession of your property, cause is a much better way to go. Getting them on breaches of the lease contract rather than going after the money. Money is a very sore subject right now with COVID. And if we get locked down again, which is imminent, let's face it, it's gonna be even more challenging. So if you can get a deferment from your mortgage company, 6 months, a year deferment of payment added on to the end of your mortgage, if that is something you feel you need to do, by all means do it. Because we're not going to get much help from the state, from the government, from anything. I mean, I already know of landlords that are getting notices of default and things of that nature because they just can't hold on anymore. I get it. I understand. It's going to be a rough, bumpy, rocky road. And I don't know what all is going to happen with election and presidential changes. Who knows? We could be ordered to wear masks inside our own homes. You never know. But it's definitely going to get worse before it gets better. For a couple weeks now, I've been saying that we've seen Italy shut down again. We're seeing Europe shut down again. It's only a matter of time before it comes here. Well, it's upon us, you guys. If you haven't paid attention, people are hoarding toilet paper and paper towels again. So in the event that is something that you need, please remember, junk mail arrives to your door every day. You don't necessarily need toilet paper when junk mail would work just fine. Just saying. You have an abundance of toilet paper you didn't even think about in a crisis. So remember that, please. That's what those grocery ads are good for in the event of a toilet paper shortage. Apparently, we're going to have the toilet paper shortage of 2020 and of 2021. You watch. Anybody have anything that they want to address, talk about, have questions that they need to be answered? But I'm telling you guys, get ready because it's going to get worse before it gets better. If you can get a hold of your mortgage company and get a deferment or something along those lines, I strongly recommend, suggest that you utilize all programs that you hear of that come your way, yada, yada, yada. Because we're going to find that there are not very many protections out there for us as landlords. So we need to do everything that we possibly can to brace for impact and prepare, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. I had no idea that we would continually be talking about this affecting us again. And if we're locked down again for another 8 months, I mean, what are our little businesses going to do? How does that handle small businesses, especially the restaurants and things that can't be open? We were sitting around the dinner table last night talking about masks and so on and so forth. And I said, you know, maybe we're going to start wearing them all the time like other countries do. Who knows? But at this point, it is extremely probable that we will go back on lockdown. If your area hasn't already, it's coming. We're getting hit harder. Who knows? Anybody have any questions for me? I know there's been some questions in regards to AB 3088 and terminating tenancy with cause, and those with cause reasons come out of AB 1482. So if you guys are looking to terminate and want to know what those causes are for termination with cause, look at the statewide rent control initiative. That would give you your reasons of cause. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Owner wants to permanently remove the house from the rental market. That's cause. That would be if you wanted to sell or move into yourself. So permanently removing from the rental market, you can absolutely do that. You do have to give a reason on your 60-day notices. So make sure you're putting the reason on there. If you're having a family member in, you can put that on there. If you want to sell, you could put that you're permanently removing it from the program. Major renovations, and you have to have city permits pulled, and it's got to be an issue where it's like a health and safety violation, where you have code enforcement on you or something like that, especially in the city of LA. I know there's special rules in LA, but we need to make sure that we are dotting those I's and crossing those T's, because it is becoming extremely challenging, not only for us as property owners, but also for your legal counsel. You need to remember that they're making changes on them as well midstream, and it makes it a little bit difficult sometimes. So just want to make sure that everybody's in tune with that and understanding that. And like I said, if you guys have an opportunity to grab a hold of a program within your city, within your county, through your mortgage lender, whatever it is, you need to make sure that you jump on that, because this is not going away anytime soon. I remember back in March and April, I would try to tell people, buckle up, brace for impact. You know, this isn't normal. They're going to write the rules as we're going, and this is going to get ugly. It hasn't lifted yet. It's just going to get worse before it gets better. So please keep that in mind. Keep open-minded. If you need somebody out of your house and you need them out of your house yesterday, not tomorrow, cash for keys is probably going to be the quickest route, other than shooting them, which isn't legal. But cash for keys, I think we're going to see quite a bit more of that going on and trying to come to an agreement of terms that way, especially if the courts shut down again. That's going to make it extremely challenging for us. I mean, at that point, we're at fight or flight. You know, we got to figure out something because sometimes that justice system is just us and no one else. So we have to figure out what works for us best. Any questions, any concerns anybody has?
I have a comment. You were mentioning cash for keys. And if I recall from one of our lectures, I think it was October 1st that something was getting lifted. So I think the cash for keys were no longer, I suppose, a vehicle. So we're going back into cash for keys, or it's always been cash for keys since?
You can always offer cash for keys. And let me simply say this, okay, just so we're on the same. It doesn't mean that you're going to come to an agreement. It doesn't mean that it's going to work. Okay. So here's my theory when it comes to a cash for keys agreement. And I always try to negotiate on my own before I turn to legal, just as far as getting them out versus evicting. Because at this point, if the court shuts down again, when are they going to reopen? What? I can't hear you. You don't know either? So are we looking at another 8 months? Because 8 months on top of this means 8 more months of rent, and then anywhere from 3 to 6 months to do the actual eviction. So are we really talking about an eviction by then, or are we talking about a foreclosure? So sometimes it makes more sense to do that cash for keys offer. You can always do a cash for keys offer, but you have to be careful about when and how you do it. Example, you serve a 3-day notice to quit to your tenant after you've done the 3-day covenant, the 24-hour, and now you're doing the quit notice. But right before you do the quit notice, you offer them cash for keys. Well, cash for keys now voids all the other notices in place. See how that worked? So the last notice you served controls. So sometimes feeling them out in a cash for keys scenario is better in a conversation and not in a written document. Wink, wink. In other words, go talk to them. You know, if you were to be given some money to move out of here, what would that look like for you? Or what would that take? Or how much would be ideal? Feel them out. If you already have, the governor is talking about a curfew. Are you flipping kidding me? I think we should shoot Governor Newsom. I think he should hold targets at the shooting range. I don't like Governor Newsom at all. Thank you, David, for just totally throwing me for a loop with that one. I can't believe he wants to implement a curfew, because that's going to help COVID spread how? Curfew as in what? When we have to be home? Some of the things. Why doesn't he close Lowe's, Home Depot, and Costco? That'll fix the problem.
Well, they're doing that on the East Coast right now with restaurants. They're having them closed by 10 o'clock. So that's a tie.
I get it, but at the same time, why are we stuffing people in outdoor dining when they could just pick it up and leave? You know, outdoor dining doesn't stop the spread of COVID.
Ambiance, I guess.
You know, I totally get where everybody's going and how everybody's trying to come up and maneuver the system to survive, because we're all in survival mode. But at what expense? I mean, this is going to be detrimental to our economy in more ways than one. If they locked us down for 6 weeks and 6 weeks only, that would be feasible, you know. But when they start continuing to talk about locking us down for several months, that isn't going to help the mom and pop businesses. Yes, the essential business most likely, but for some of these restaurants and these cleaners and clothes cleaners and things that aren't considered essential businesses, it's going to really wreak havoc on them, you know. And I'd love to tell you guys what I think is going to happen, but the reality is my crystal ball is broken. It's going to get worse before it gets better, and there is no doubt about that. Okay, let me see what else David said. Governor's talking about a curfew from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. instead of shelter in place. How would that affect us? How is it going to help us? I mean, he's telling people they have to be home and go to bed at their house. Don't we do that already? I mean, it really just doesn't make much sense. I get that we're not supposed to be out and about, but if you have an emergency, guess what? You're going to be out and about. But for the most part, we don't go gas our cars at midnight. I I think that that's a cheap shot at trying to fix an issue, and it's not going to help at all. But again, what do I know? I'm just blonde. Curfew. Yeah, that's a good one. I just hope that they don't lock us in our house like they did in China, where they bolted people's doors shut from the outside. The government was like, "You're staying in your place. Watch this." I don't want that to happen. Yeah, it's gonna be a mess, I'm sure. In the meantime, make sure that you're doing everything that's required of you. Even if your tenants vacate on a cash for keys agreement, you do still have to do your final disposition of security deposit or your estimated disposition of security deposit within 21 days of receiving possession. So make sure that you do that so that you're in compliance with California Civil Code 1947.5. If you fail to do that, the tenant can sue you in small claims court for up to 3 times the amount of the deposit. Be mindful of that. Because that's one of the first things they teach tenants is, did you get your deposit back in 21 days? I mean, it's posted everywhere. It's what it is. Don't miss those deadlines. 18 days, in my opinion, is pushing the envelope. I always want to make sure I have mine postmarked around day 18 or 19, just because I'd rather be safe than sorry. So make sure that we're getting those done. If you're offering cash for keys, make sure you're one of 4 people. One of 4, okay? Only 4 people can do cash for keys offers. Hold on, Tour, I'll be right with you. 4 people can do a cash for keys offers. Only the owner of record directly, a real estate agent working under a broker, a real estate broker, or an attorney are the only ones that can negotiate a cash for keys deal. So if you're a property manager, an on-site manager that's not a licensed agent, it is not something you can negotiate. You're going to have to get an attorney or a real estate agent to do it. The reason I'm being adamant and pushing that issue is you do not want to be caught practicing real estate without a license. And that's what that would be. It's a real estate transaction. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't give them a dime of money until you are standing at the door, you are looking inside, it is broom swept, and they are completely out and they are giving you the key. That is when the money exchange happens. Not, I need $2,000 of the money so that I can put down a deposit somewhere else. No, that's not how this works. You give them money when they give you the vacant house. That's how it works. End of story. We don't trust, we don't, no, nothing. Okay. And then hang on, I saw something regarding AB 1482. Yes. Let me help you with property exempt from AB 1482. In San Diego City, you have your own just cause termination of tenancy. That is going to supersede the state law because it's more restrictive. So you guys have reasons that you have to terminate tenancy under in the city of San Diego, that still applies to you. Even if you're exempt from the statewide rent control, your city still has an ordinance regarding termination of tenancy if they've been there over 2 years and what those causes are. You need to follow those. So city of San Diego has their own rules as far as that goes. For everyone else, even if you're exempt from AB 1482, the statewide rent control initiative, part of the new AB 3088, which is the Tenant COVID Relief Protection Act, whatever you want to call it, they implemented the just cause reasons for terminating tenancy from AB 1482. So in other words, they took the Tenant Relief Act and said, if you want to terminate tenancy, you need cause, just like in the statewide rent control initiative. So that's where they pulled the guidelines for terminating tenancy with COVID, just so that you understand. But in the city of San Diego, it is very similar. And forgive me for saying this because I know it's not that similar. But it is similar to the city of LA. So how I can explain that to you, and maybe you can retain it for future reference, is when it comes to restrictions, whoever it may be, the restriction that restricts the most is the one that controls you. So in the city of San Diego, you have the most restrictions, not with the statewide initiative. So the city is going to control, and those rules would apply. I hope that answers your question. You have to follow City of San Diego's relocation guidelines. Anybody else have a question? Hold on. City of San Diego doesn't have rent control. No, you're right. City of San Diego does not have rent control. However, City of San Diego has something called just cause evictions. So basically in the city of San Diego, you can't give a 30-day or a 60-day notice to your tenant to terminate tenancy just because you want to. You have to have a reason. Those reasons are clearly spelled out in their city ordinance, where owners moving back into the property, whatever the ordinance is of what your reasons. You're having to do major renovations. If you're doing that in the city of San Diego, you better hope that there's permits required. And those permits have already been pulled, because that's a way for them to deny you if you don't already have permits pulled. So in the city of San Diego, not in the county, they do have certain restrictions for terminating tenancy. Okay. And you have to have a reason to terminate tenancy. You can't just say, I don't like you. I want my house back. It doesn't work that way. City of San Diego does require that you give a reason on your 60-day notice, and you have to follow that to the T. And as far as I know, that is still implemented. That law passed probably about 3 years ago, if I had to guess. Any more questions?
Patty, I guess a question to fill in some blanks. I was talking to you on the phone the other day, and I was taking notes, and my notes were not very good. So I was trying to fill in the blanks since then, and maybe you can help me out a little bit here. I have this pest issue, and you had mentioned something about the law says about infestation. Do you recall that conversation?
I absolutely do.
Okay, so so the words, I'm gonna write it down again because I didn't get all the words exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna come right back to you. I want to answer Jay Tour's question really quickly, okay? And then I'll come right back to you because I know what I need to tell you. Jay Tour, you're asking, is it still the 31st of January that the tenant doesn't have to pay? Let me explain to you. Because of the COVID Tenant Relief Act, all they have to do is say they were affected by COVID, and then 25% of the rent is due by January 31st of next year. The other 75% would be due in February on the 1st, after the bill expires. They will probably do something to extend the bill. They will probably do something to extend that. And now that we're going back on lockdown again, most likely, that may change again as well. So lots of moving parts still. Don't get too hung up on January as being the light at the end of the tunnel, because I don't think that's necessarily so. Okay, and that's just me talking to you, but I'm trying to get you to really prepare for the unknown, because that's what's being thrown at us, is the unknown. Nick, to answer your question in regards to habitable premises, there is health and safety law, habitability issues, and civil code that said that. And it clearly states that both insects and vermin are considered a habitability issue in the eyes of the court. So if you have an infestation of ants, cockroaches, bed bugs, they are ultimately considered vermin in the eyes of the court and are a habitability issue. So until they're rectified, no rent is owed. And in the event that your exterminator would put in writing the cause of infestation was from the tenant's negligence, then you could most likely charge that back to the tenant and make it a tenant expense.
Thank you.
But in order to do that, the third party exterminator is going to need to put on his report the cause of the infestation. Remember, he's the professional. So in a court, that's who the judge is going to listen to. And I'm not telling you, hey, go get this document and go get this document. What I'm telling you is if you end up in a court battle, those are the documents you need to cover your rear end, simply said. So if your exterminator says, oh, they're filthy pigs, and here's a cleanliness report, you need to act on that. You need to serve them a 3-day curable breach of covenant stating that they need to clean their house and they have the infestation due to cleanliness, and that the charges for the exterminator are going to be billed back to them, and they have 3 days to correct the issue of their unit not being clean. The reason being is if now it infests neighboring units, you have a cause because you know who started it, but you as a landlord could be held accountable for everybody else's infestation due to one tenant's negligence. So we don't want to end up in any class action lawsuits. We don't want all the rest of our tenants turning against us. I don't like litigious people, so let's stay away from that. Remedy upon notification is the easiest, simplest way that you can handle that. Remedy upon notification. I saw another question from you. Hang on. How does he know who caused the infestation? Will professional write it? Okay. The exterminator usually can tell where the cause of the infestation was based on the amount of, I hate to say it this way, bug poop, dead carcasses, and things that they find in that general area. Okay. They can usually, and sometimes, believe it or not, and this happens more than I'd like to admit, the tenant will tell them, well, I know how I got the bed bugs. My husband restores old antique furniture. They just told on themselves. They're not going to tell you that. You're the property manager. You're the landlord. You're the bad guy. But you'd be shocked how much they tell handyman and exterminators, and because they feel no threat from them. What they don't remember is you're the one that's paying that exterminator and handyman, and they are now reporting to you. So if they put that on their invoice, then you have the capability of billing that back, that expense to the tenant, deducting it from the security deposit, suing them in small claims court while they still live in the property. I mean, you just have a lot of options. I've actually sued somebody in small claims why they still lived in the property because I knew where to find them so I could serve them. And I won. I won a $4,000 bed bug extermination fees, etc. I want to say it was about $4,000, and I won that. Why they still lived in the property? I mean, it just depends. Everybody goes, well, what's a procedure for this? Well, it depends. What are you trying to do? You have options. You have several options. You could send them a bill, wait 30 days and file a small claims action against them while they still live there. You could bill it back to them and send them a bill every month. You could put that on their ledger, take the next incoming payment to pay it, and then the balance they owe would be considered rent. You could hold on to it and leave it as a roaring balance on their ledger and then charge them and deduct it from their security deposit at move out. I mean, you have a lot of options of how you want to handle many situations that come to you. Chargebacks is one of them. It would be no different if the tenant broke a window. You still have to pay to fix that window. But if you can prove that the tenant broke that window due to negligence and it wasn't somebody just walking by that threw a brick at them, then you will most likely be able to charge the tenant back from that. Believe it or not, a glass company can tell if the window was broken from the inside out or the outside in. It just happens. So again, you want to utilize that professional that third party, because that's the difference. That's what saves you. It's not what you say and what you think, it's what that professional says and what they put on paper.
I got a question. You're bringing up an interesting point. I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm thinking about it when you're talking. You talk about negligence, right? Is nuisance in the same family?
It could be to an extent, but it depends on what we're speaking of. Let me give you an example. You have a 5-unit apartment community, 5 units. The tenant in unit 3 has bed bugs. Okay. You say, well, they've had bed bugs 4 times this year. I'm not doing anything about it. I'm sick of doing this. And if this sounds familiar, you guys, be careful. They're taking advantage of me. Well, you don't do anything about it. And now all 5 units are infested with bed bugs. Here's the reality of that. All 5 units don't owe rent from the time that they told you that there was a problem to the time you remedy it. That's number one. That's how a habitability issue works. Okay. If you fix it, even though it's their fault, and then turn around and send them the bill and tell them you're billing it back to them, suing them in small claims, adding it to their ledger, however you want to handle the situation, you're actually doing your job and protecting the other residents, providing them with habitable premises. You're being a landlord. When you just ignore and say, forget it, I've had enough of it, it turns into a giant tornado that you're now having to deal with rather than just one incident. So even though you're getting frustrated with whatever's happening, call me. Let's talk about it. I don't want you to get to the point where you're like, I'm not even fixing this anymore. And I'll give you a great example. Had a tenant in a property that every other month she had to have the drain snaked because it was hair clogged. Every other month. That's 6 times a year. So asked several different attorneys. I don't ever ask just one because I found out attorneys have opinions. They're not, that's why they call it practicing law, is it's not an exact science. And what I found out is that twice annually is considered wear and tear. Twice annually. So all those other times, I got to bill that tenant back for unclogging the drain of the hair clog. She also had hair that was 4 feet long. No joke. No joke. She really did have 4 foot long hair. But the owner's not responsible to deal with her plumbing issues because of her 4 foot long hair. Okay. Twice annually is reasonable. Anything more than that could and most likely would be considered above and beyond wear and tear and get into the damages range. So different ways you could do it. But remember this, if she has plugged up drain and she tells you she has a plugged up drain, even though it's clogged by her 4 foot long hairs, she doesn't owe rent till you fix it. Bottom line. She doesn't owe rent till you fix it. So even though you're getting frustrated with the situation, that's when you need to call out. That's when you need to reach out. That's when you need to start talking to legal counsel, etc., to find out what your options are. Don't just sit there and get frustrated because the first time they shut you down, the second time they shut you down. It's the third and fourth time where you can do something about it. You see the issue? The first and second time you couldn't because twice a year is reasonable. So it just depends on what's flowing, but don't get yourself to where you're getting all round up and pissed off and spending money and bleeding. You know, it's just not how we want to handle things. If the tenant has to move out for termite tenting, etc., do I have to put them in a hotel or just forego the rent? It depends on what your rental agreement says. I'll make this as simple as I can for you guys, okay? And I can't give you legal advice. I'm not an attorney, but please listen to what I'm trying to explain to you. If you put a tenant in a term for 1 year, it sounds great to us as landlords because it sounds like they got to stay with us the whole year, right? That's not the case. They could move out at any time. Could they be responsible for the duration of the term? Yes. As soon as somebody else moves in, they're no longer responsible. That's how that works, okay? So by putting someone in a term for time, you as a landlord can't do anything, change the rules, raise the rents, do anything to change those terms until that term is over. If you're subject to statewide rent control, which the majority of us are, and you put them in a 1-year contract, you're immediately signing up to pay them relocation fees when they vacate. That's what you're doing, because at that point they've lived there for 1 year or longer. If you put them on a month-to-month or a 6-month contract, okay, you're not signing up to pay them relocation fees when they move out.
I didn't know that.
Statewide rent control says after 12 months of tenancy, we have to give them their last month's rent as a relocation fee for statewide rent control. If we have them on a month-to-month contract and by month 11 we don't like them, we could give them a 30-day notice to terminate tenancy with no reason, and we don't owe the relocation fees. If you put them in a 1-year contract, you're signing up to pay them when they move out. That's what you're doing, okay? So just a different way to look at things. You have more control as a landlord on a month-to-month contract or on a smaller turnaround time. Remember, we can't force them to live there for that time period. Okay, they could come to you at any time and say, I'm a victim of domestic violence, and get out of their lease term with a 14-day notice. Done. Okay, it doesn't help you as a landlord. It helps them as a tenant. A lot of corporate America use 1-year lease terms and so forth as a tool, saying, because it kind of can be a tool, I'm not going to do anything, or I'm not going to touch you. I'm not going to raise the rent. I'm not going to change the rules. I can't do anything for 1 year. So in some instances, your hands are tied. I see questions coming in. Hold on. I'm a property manager. Hi, Anna. I need to know if I sent a security deposit refund form along with the estimate to a resident that vacated. Waiving the right for the initial move-out inspection, the security deposit did not cover all the damage and the resident owed you $200. So let me answer that for you. You sent a security deposit refund form along with an estimate to a resident that vacated. Okay, so you did an estimated deposit, security deposit form, because we cannot base our final off of estimates. It has to be actual invoices. So within the 21 days, as required by the statute, I believe it's California Civil Code 1950.5, Section E and Section F. You have 21 days to refund the tenant's security deposit or give them a written statement as to where their deposit was applied. If within those 21 days you don't have the actual invoices and the receipts, you must send them the estimates, write estimated at the top of it, and send them an estimated disposition of security deposit within the 21 days. Within 14 days of you receiving the final invoice, you must then send a final disposition of security deposit to your tenant to be in complete compliance with California Civil Code 1950.5, Section E, Section F, and yes, I think that's, yeah, E and F, time and money. So yes. I hope that answers your question. If you're doing estimates with it, you need to write estimated at the top of the disposition, knowing full well that you're going to have to do a whole nother one once you get that final invoice. I also recommend that you estimate high, because from your estimated to your final, you cannot increase any prices. You can only reduce them. Okay? So you can always put a whole bunch of stuff on the estimated, and then when you get to the final, it could be way less than that. You can say, okay, I'm not charging them this and I'm not charging them that. And you could do it that way. But on that final, it has to be invoices. You have to have the invoices. You can't have any estimates. I hope that answered your question. And I'm going back to the next one. In Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, you have to pay relocation fee no matter what. Is that true? No. If the tenant is vacating, you don't owe any relocation fees in the city of Los Angeles. Absolutely, hands down. If the tenant gives you notice, I'm vacating the unit, which I'm going to be really honest with you, they never do. They just move somebody else in and start subletting, or another family member and they take over. They never give you notice and vacate. But if they give you notice and they vacate on their own, You don't owe them relocation fees because they vacated. You only owe relocation fees if you want them out. You want to sell, you want to move back in yourself, major repairs need to be done, you're removing it from the rental market. These are all reasons why you would terminate tenancy and pay relocation fees to a tenant. Sometimes that can be a negotiation tool in an unlawful detainer action between legal counsel as well. So they may say, okay, no problem, Anna. I'll come back to your question. That's why I'm here, girly. I got you. But as far as relocation fees go, it just depends. But if they are terminating, they leave on their own, they vacate in the middle of the night, they abandon the property, you do not owe relocation fees in LA. That's only if you as a landlord are telling them to get out. Yes, you can absolutely call me anytime, Anna. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions in regards to dispositions of security deposit. I don't want to say that they're my area of expertise. I call them dispos for short, and I've probably done over 3,000 of them in my career. It's insane. Okay, hold on. Let me see. Could you please repeat about 1 year lease and pay the tenant 1 month rent, that 6 month? Okay, I get what you're saying. So let me put this in perspective for you. Under the new statewide rent control initiative, AB 1482, it clearly states that for any tenant that lives there for 1 year or longer, the landlord must pay them the last month's rent as relocation fees. Okay? So going down the line, if the landlord wants to terminate tenancy, they want to move back in, they want to sell, they want their unit back, they're doing major renovations, whatever it is, they then have to give the tenant a 60-day notice if they've lived there longer than 1 year. 1 year or longer is how that works. 1 year or longer. They're going to have to give them a 60-day notice and also either pay their last month's rent or give them a full month's rent on top of their security deposit. It's just part of the relocation through the statewide rent control initiative. If they're there, and there's another caveat to that, so let me add that in there. If within the 12-month period, the tenant brings in a roommate, the clock starts over again for 12 months. So basically, either the original tenant has to be there for a total of 24 months, or it's just one tenant, they didn't bring in anybody extra, it would be 12 months. So that's how that works as far as the relocation fee goes to them. If they've been there less than 1 year, there is no relocation fee under the statewide rent control initiative. So with that being said, if you put your tenant in a 3-month lease and they live there 11 months and you don't like them anymore, you could give them a 30-day notice to vacate. They have to vacate prior to living there for a year. It all happens at 1 year or longer. At 1 year or longer of the tenant living in the property under AB 1482, you now owe them a full month's rent as relocation fees for them to go. Does that make sense? So if you put them on a month-to-month contract at hello and you don't like them, or they're annoying, or they're a nuisance in your property, you can just turn around and give them notice. Hold on. If after 1 year lease, has it switched to month, do I still have to pay for 1 month? You have to pay it as soon as your 1 year lease is over. For the most part, pay attention, nobody uses a 1 year lease contract anymore except corporate America. Corporate America doesn't want that quick turnaround. So they're looking for longevity. It's a false sense of security and it ties the landlord's hands. But at the same time, people that are living in corporate America under corporate's guidelines, etc., and their criteria are more likely to stay there for a whole year and want to go somewhere where they're locking them in for a year with nothing weird being able to happen to them. It's some security for the tenant, not the landlord. I mean, we've all done it before. We've put somebody in a 1-year contract, and then 2 months later, we've had a problem with something else going on. Maybe it's smoking in a building. Maybe it's something. We can't change those rules until the end of their term. If they're on a month to month, you can change their rules right after that first month, anytime you want to, going forward. And if they've lived there a whole year, then you're going to owe them the relocation fees at the end of it. Okay, I hope that explained. And that's all part of AB 1482, the Statewide Rent Control Act that passed January 1st of last year. Any questions?
I got one, Patty. You're talking about, I think we lost focus on one of the topics that we were talking about, to get back on it maybe. Termite tenting. I think somebody was talking about termite tenting, and I think the tenants, we had to pay for their, wherever they go. Is that kind of get back on?
It depends on what your rental contract says. And Nick,
Oh,
thank
that's
you
right.
for reeling me back in.
Okay.
If they're in a term, here's what that term says: that you as a landlord are going to provide them habitable premises for until the end of that term. So guess who has to pay to put them in a hotel and give them a rent credit? And in the event that they ask for a food allowance, because you can't cook in a hotel, you're then going to owe them $10 per person per meal per day. And that price doesn't discriminate. So a breastfed infant is going to get $10 per meal per day. Okay. On top of that, if they say that they had to take their clothes to the cleaners because they couldn't do laundry, you're going to owe them that as a refund as well. So I like to tell my tenants that they have to have renter's insurance. So in the event that the house becomes uninhabitable, that's where their renter's insurance kicks in. Can you charge them rent? No, it's a habitability issue. We can't charge rent, but if you can push them to get renter's insurance when things go badly, your life becomes much easier. Just saying. I hope that helped. And then I saw something else come through on the chat. If contract is silent. After a 1-year lease is switched to a month to month, you still have to pay the month. I don't know what you mean by if contract is silent.
Verbal?
If you mean that you have an oral agreement, let me explain to you how that works. The tenants have all the rights and you don't. When you don't have rules and you have an oral agreement and you have nothing in writing, you have to follow all the laws to the T, benefiting the tenant to the T. When you have a written agreement, those are the rules of which everybody has to follow. So if you put in there that the tenant must obtain renter's insurance and they failed to do so, number one, that's a reason you could evict them. Number two, that's a reason for you to go, whoa. And I'll give you an example. One of our properties, one of my clients' properties recently had a flood of septic water. Ew, ew, and ew. Okay? It's dirty water. Flooded inside the units, flooded people's couches, flooded people's beds, yada, yada, yada. If the tenants don't have renter's insurance to cover their personal belongings and it's been disclosed that it's not required or it's highly recommended or something along those lines, and I always say it is required. I want to be listed as an additional insured or interested party on their policy. So if they don't make their payment, I get notification. That notification causes me to do a 3-day curable breach of covenant. They're in violation of their rental contract. See how that worked? Okay. So that's why I keep it that way, because I want to know if they're not insured. But now, as a landlord, on people that are in a lease contract, who's responsible for their couch, their bed, and all those things that just got destroyed inside that unit? Who has to buy them a whole new set of furniture? You or their insurance company? You pick when they move in. See how that worked? So in other words, what you want to tell them is you really need to get renter's insurance. It's what covers your personal belongings in a fire, in a flood. If you fly to New York and the airline loses your luggage, it's your renter's insurance that covers your personal belongings wherever you go. We've all had a car that got broken into at some point or another, especially if you live in LA, and they steal the radio and your CDs and a bunch of other stuff out of your car. Remember this, you guys. Your car insurance covers the window they broke and puts the radio back in, but they don't cover your personal items that were stolen out of the car. Your CDs, your purse, your suitcase, your laptop, whatever else they stole. Your car insurance doesn't cover that, but your homeowner's insurance does, or your renter's insurance does. So it's a very easy way to sell insurance to the tenant. Because let's face it, we want them to have that insurance, because then when things go bad, our life gets much easier, because we just tell them, call your insurance agent and file a claim. You don't want to be stuck paying these people's furnitures, and you don't want to be stuck paying for their personal items, and you don't want to be on the hook for this stuff in the event that something goes bad. It happens very quickly, it happens very fast, and it's just not a good idea. We want to be able to, forgive me for saying this, but put the blame on someone else. Oh, I'm sorry. We highly recommended that you get renter's insurance. If you didn't do that, that's what covers your personal belongings, not me, the landlord. Makes your life easier, okay? I promise. Because the first thing that happens when they would have bed bugs is they have a couch or some piece of furniture that the exterminator says, I just can't get the bugs out of there. They need to throw that out. Now they want you to buy them a new one. No, that's where their renter's insurance comes in, not you. So it does play a big part, and I can't help you encourage renter's insurance enough. Being is that my renter's insurance is just for information or payment of damages to me. My being on the renter's insurance is just for the information of payment of damages to me. That's not true. If you're listed as an additional insured or an interested party, and let me say this, okay? When I worked in corporate America as a regional property manager, we had several different types of insurance. We made tenants have renter's insurance. We made our landlords that we manage their investments have owner's insurance on their properties, and we made our vendors have insurance as well. Now, our company was listed as an additional insured or interested party on the owner's policies, on the vendor's policies, and on the tenant's renter's policies. Because if somebody didn't make a payment and that policy was going to get canceled, we needed to know about it from our landlords, from our vendors doing work on the property, and from our tenants. It's a lot of paperwork and it's a lot of work, but when you're talking about covering your asset from all aspects, that's how you do it. Insurance, insurance, insurance. So you may have somebody in your office that is dedicated to just handling all the insurance and keeping that all straight, of which vendors' insurance lapse because we don't want to use them anymore, which tenants' insurance are lapping, so we can serve them a notice that they're in violation of their rental contract, and which owners' policies are canceling for non-payment. A lot of times owners switch policies and they don't tell us. That's how we find out. That's how we know if they're insured. And let's face it, if we move a tenant into a property and there's no insurance on that house and there's a fire in that house, we personally don't want to be held responsible for wrongful death because that owner didn't have insurance on the property. We want to be able to blame an insurance company. Okay, if you don't keep all your insurances moving properly, it could and most likely will fall on you. We don't want that. So lots of moving parts with insurance and covering your asset. It's actually a class that I teach. Is there a good renter's insurance policy? Yes, absolutely. Tell your tenants that they should contact whoever their auto insurance is from. State Farm, Farmers, Geico, Allstate, they all offer renter's insurance too. Usually they get a multi-policy discount that way, and it ends up costing them about $10 to $15 a month for renter's insurance on top of their car insurance. So what is that? 4 less trips to Starbucks every month? I mean, it's not expensive, but well worth it when it covers their personal belongings wherever they go. So If they fly and the airline loses their luggage, if they're moving in a moving van and somebody steals the moving van with all their stuff in it, their renter's insurance would cover all of that. It covers their stuff wherever they go. So definitely something that we want to keep on top of, keep in the loop, make sure that there's coverage there. It is so much easier just to hit that easy button when something goes badly and make them responsible, make the insurance company responsible. Anybody that does auto insurance also does renter's insurance. It's just a given. And then they give them multi-policy discounts. So they end up benefiting more from it. I had a tenant that added $250,000 of rental coverage for personal belongings, and it ended up costing them $17 more a month on their policy. And they just thought that was amazing. That now they have $250,000 worth of coverage on their personal belongings, and their deductible is like $50. So not a big deal if they need to file a claim. That also puts them up if they need to be relocated because of a flood where they live. I mean, it really protects them. If they get evacuated for fire, it covers them for that. It's going to pay for them for a hotel. I know because I've used mine before. So just different aspects that can happen, life, if you will, that renter's insurance helps coverage. There's also a new insurance out there called tenant default insurance. And tenant default insurance covers if the tenant doesn't pay the rent. So definitely another form of insurance coverage out there. Can you send a change of tenancy to all tenants stating that you now require renter's insurance? My contract says that renter's insurance is recommended and not required. Yes, you can if they're not in a term. Remember, if they signed a 1-year contract, you can't send them a change of terms until that year is over. See how that ties your hands? So if you want to change the rules, you got to wait until their term's over and then give them a 30-day notice of change of terms of tenancy. But if they are on month to months, you absolutely can do that. It's not a problem. If you're in the city of Los Angeles, it makes it much more challenging. So city of Los Angeles, you can't. City of Los Angeles, you can't. There's a lot of things in the city of Los Angeles we can't do. But changing terms of tenancy, the only thing that you can change for in the city of Los Angeles is your attorney's fees clause and your annual rent increase. And if you're not, you should be doing an annual deposit increase as well. So if you're raising the rents in LA under rent control, you need to raise the rent and the deposit together. Because you can. And if you don't, you shoot yourself in the foot at a later date, if that makes sense. Let me see what else just came up. If I don't have it in writing on the lease, but it's on an addendum to the rental agreement, is it enforceable that renters carry renter insurance? Absolutely. An addendum or addenda, which means multiple addendums, becomes part of your rental agreement, whether it is signed at a later date or at the date of inception when they move in. It doesn't matter. It's addenda and it is enforceable as your rental agreement. And you need to know this. Just because you put it in your rental agreement doesn't make it legal. And I'll give you a great example and it'll start a whole nother conversation, I promise, and I'm sorry. If you were to put in your rental agreement that tenants are, and don't do this, okay? I'm not telling you to do this, don't do this. But if you were to put this in your rental agreement, follow along, okay? If you were to put in there that tenants are responsible for plumbing maintenance for the first $100 for each plumbing bill that may arise, just because you put it in your lease doesn't make it legal. So let's pretend that you have a clause in there that says the tenants are responsible for the first $100 for any plumbing maintenance. Here becomes me being devil's advocate. Who's responsible to provide habitable premises? You or the tenant? You are, the landlord. So you have to pay the first $100 of any plumbing expenses because you have to provide habitable premises. So if the garbage disposal jams up or something's leaking, you have to pay to fix that. That's your job as a landlord. Just because you put it in the lease doesn't make it legal. You with me? So now when you get in front of a judge in a court of law and a judge sees something like that he knows is illegal, is he going to pick apart the rest of your contract? Just saying. Okay. So just because you put it in your lease doesn't make it legal. And you always want to talk to somebody about it first. Sometimes we have these great ideas of, I'm so sick of this happening, I'm going to put something in the rental agreement. Talk to your legal counsel before you alter your rental agreement. Your rental agreement is the tools of which they have to follow. It's the basis of how the whole thing's going to play out in a courtroom. You don't want to go altering that if you don't know what you're doing, because you could be hurting yourself. Just saying. Anybody have anything else, or I'm going to go ahead and end this today. We are going to do some more training classes as things arise regarding the lockdowns, the shutdowns, the reopenings, however this whole thing goes. Try not to bombard you guys too much over the holidays. I know it can be quite difficult. If we get a new law change, if something weird starts popping up, I'm going to be popping up. We'll do a flash webinar. You guys will all be notified. I want to keep you in the loop when something odd happens, just so that we're all on the same page. Education in this industry is what helps us the most right now. And the fear of the unknown is definitely something that also concerns all of us. And we have so much unknown right now. We haven't heard from Fair Housing yet over what's a reasonable time to terminate tenancy after a global pandemic and it not be retaliation. We still don't know the answer to that. Fair Housing has not spoken up. We also haven't completely opened the state. So it kind of makes sense as to why we don't have some of these answers yet. If we get locked down again, it could cause a whole nother hiccup in the whole shebang. And God knows what will happen to 3088, which just passed. So we have to err on the side of caution. Be very careful what's coming out of our mouth. And if you get angry and you get frustrated, don't vent that in the direction of your tenant. Okay. That is going to be harmful for you going forward. It's no different than you building a new relationship in your own house. When you're building a relationship with the tenant, it's the same way. Once you cross that line or vent in their general direction, you're ruining the relationship. You're setting the standard for them to do it back. And we don't want that. They have more teeth than we do, especially right now with all the protections regarding the global pandemic. I mean, come on. They don't even owe rent until next year. It's ridiculous. So we want to keep that on a very much business professional level and even keel as we can. And remember, you guys, if you don't know the answers to the questions they're asking you, please use your fogging techniques. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll let my supervisor know. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll talk to my partner and get back to you. Even if you don't have a partner, they don't know that. Use that as a scapegoat for you to not give the wrong answer, okay? Use that to buy time. Play nice, okay? We use it a lot in corporate America. I'm telling you to use it too. It's called fogging techniques, okay? So you're putting a little fog their direction, telling them you'll get back to them. By all means, get an answer and get back to them. This is business. We need to keep it on that level. But if you don't know the answer, just don't start pulling them out of thin air. All right. You guys have a wonderful weekend. I will be back next week. Wait, will I? Should I come back next week? It's the day before Thanksgiving. Don't do it. Anybody want me to come back next week? Let me know. It's the day before Thanksgiving and my birthday, so it's not a good day to do a webinar. Everybody's like, no, don't do it on Wednesday. Okay, I'm gonna have a happy birthday all by myself, okay? Thank you. All right, you guys have a wonderful weekend. If you need me, you know how to hunt me down. We most likely will not go live next week, and I will see you the week after. But if something happens in legislation, if I'm seeing something, I'll send a mass email to everybody, and we'll do a pop-in Widget's Way or some kind of a webinar just to keep you guys informed of the changes. Bye, everybody. Have a good one. We'll talk soon, I'm sure.